And the thing about al-fisq, right? There's a word in Arabic we call istilaha or mustalahat, right? Istilaha, we could think of it as like terminology, right? The Qur'an is a book, right, of Allah's speech that has Allah's own terminology for things. And this is something important. This is one reason why the Arabic is such an integral part to understanding the Quran and of the mu'jiza and the immutability of the Quran, is because Allah has, in His speech, has referred to things and described them in a certain way that they are not up for grabs. And that's exactly what Allah says in a few ayats before that, that they want yuharrifu al-kalam min ba'di mawadi'ihi. One of the issues that the Jews wanted to do, and people in general, but one of the things that He definitely admonishes Bani Israel for doing, is they kept wanting to change the meanings of the words that Allah gave them in the Quran or in the Torah, in Revelation. They kept wanting to change them from what they were. And so we need to understand that, and we see this today. This is not something exclusive to the issue of Bani Israel. And I don't mean this in an antagonistic way, but there are some schools of thought when it comes to practicing Islam that they come up with some of their own terminology. Now, if you're trying to explain something, fine. To use language to explain something, bayan, this is not an issue. But to say this is that, when Allah has defined that in the Quran, la yajuz, this is not permissible. So one simple example is that you will have some people, they will say tasawwuf is ihsan. No, ihsan is ihsan, because Allah Ta'ala has defined what ihsan is in the Quran. And Sayyidina Jibril alayhi salam came to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu and asked those questions about Iman, Islam, and Ihsan to teach the Muslims their religion. And so when we want to say that, oh, well, Tasawwuf is the same as Ihsan, no, this is not acceptable. Now, I'm not saying that Tasawwuf is not a thing, but we should be careful to say that one is the same as the other, because these terms that Allah has used in His book are immutable. And we should have a level of reverence and respect. This is why in the past there has been some difference of opinion and some contention over people wanting to change some of these words. And if you want to say that there were people from a certain group and they were trying to actualize ihsan of what Allah talked about, right? That, if you worship Allah as if you can see Him, though that you cannot see Him, you know that He sees you. But why, if that's the case, why do we need to call this anything other than ihsan? And so this has been some of the legitimate criticism of some people wanting to change the mustalahat or the specific terminology that Allah uses in the Quran and call it something else. Now, again, wanting to give a bayan, an explanation of something, that's, of course, especially you deal with people that not everybody speaks the Arabic language, certain concepts will have to be explained. But to say that something is this and that now we can just almost completely do away with the other word and exclusively use the new one, we should be very careful with this, because this is exactly one of the things that Allah was saying about Bani Israel. You're changing the words from their intended meanings. And so again, along with the practice of tasawwuf, some people think that tasawwuf isn't just simply, having good character and watching your tongue and lowering your gaze and being obedient to Allah, but it's also doing group dhikr or spinning around in a circle and wearing a certain special. No, I'm being very serious, because that is associated with tasawwuf. But that is not what Sayyidina Jibril alayhi salam came to teach the Prophet ﷺ and the companions when he described, well, what is ihsan? That is not what Allah says in the Quran about ihsan, about spinning around in a circle. And so we should not get overly emotional with some of these very legitimate criticisms, because they are based in this idea of like, look, the Qur'an is the immutable word of Allah. Of course, we give bayan on it, we give tadabbur, we reflect upon it, we contemplate it, but we also revere the fact that those are words that Allah chose, and they were sufficient for us to be able to be guided and understand it. We should leave them where they are and only go as far as we need to explain them in order to execute them. And anything beyond that is like, well, what are you doing?